Hi there and welcome to the sew along video. So today we are going to be using both an overlocker and a plain stitch on our sewing machine. To start with, the seam allowances are listed in the information sheet. I'll detail those as we go through the sew along video. Mainly we're going to be sewing overlocking with a 6mm, which is a 1/4 of an inch seam. Use 4 threads on this for construction. Make sure the width on your overlocker is set to 6mm. So with our sewing machine, make sure you have a ball needle in that machine and lengthen your stitch length slightly from normal. If it's normally set at 2.5, up it to maybe 3.5, and just do some test stitching on spare fabric before you begin. So in addition to this, it's a good idea if you have a cover seamer. We can use that for the hems. If you don't have a cover seamer, you can use either a twin needle in a domestic sewing machine. That will give us a nice stretch stitch. Or you can do, what I'm going to do is to show you, for those who don't have access to that, we're just going to be using our plain stitch on our sewing machine. So when you're ready, we'll get started on the hood pieces. So the pieces we need to construct the hood are the main hood piece and the hood facing pieces. So these are both cut out as a pair, which is also called 2 mirrors. So when we cut it out, we cut one up this way and then we cut one up that way. So when you're ready, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the main hood part. Place your pieces right sides together, and we are going to sew through the long centre back seam. So this is the one that runs through the middle of our head. Now the top is marked with a notch just in from the edge, so make sure you match that. And as we overlock down the side, there'll be a notch down the seam to match as well, and that's just to make sure that we sew this in the correct place. And it's a double notch because 2 notches mean it's the back of our garment. So making sure your right sides are together, and hopefully you've already set your dials and checked your stitching on your overlocker. Just overlock that long curved seam together. Now when we're overlocking, we're not cutting any fabric off. We just want to use this blade to trim off the edge of our fabric. There are our double notches there. Right, so just set that piece aside and come to the facing piece. Now the facing piece is designed so we can sew an edge around our hood. So it's going to sit against our face opening edge like so. So the first thing you're going to want to know is which is the top. Well, the top edge has a notch cut in just from the edge. So the first thing we need to do is place these pieces right sides together, and we want to overlock the seam with the notch just in. Okay, so here is our piece. And the next place we need to overlock, just to secure it, is this outside curve. Now it's the side with no notch in it. The inside curve has got a notch. We want to leave that. We want to overlock this outside, the long curve. So overlock this from one end with the right side facing up. Okay, so take this piece we've just overlocked and make sure it's right side up. Come to the seam area and then place it inside our hood like so. But what we want is the unoverlocked edge out. So that's what we want to do. Now you'll know you've done it right because the notch down here will match to a notch on the hood like so. So if you need to, pin that into place just to check it's all accurate. And what I'm going to do is overlock these pieces together from one end to the other, making sure we match those raw edges nicely. Okay, so now we're going to move over to our plain sewing machine to stitch this into place. Right, so here we are at our plain stitch sewing machine. This has a ball needle in it, and I've lengthened my stitch length and I've pre-tested this. So what we're going to do now is turn this hood facing to the inside, and we're going to stitch a line of stitching to hold it down. Now, the best place to stitch the stitching is directly through this overlocking line. So if you want to, you can do this from the front, or you can do it from the back. It's far easier to do it from the back because you can see where you're going, as long as you've done this nice and easily. When I say done this, I mean cut it out and also overlocked that edge. So clearly if you wanted to, you could cut this facing piece as a contrast colour. Now, before you go and stitch it, what we want to do is stitch it so that that fold is directly on the edge. You may find it easier to go to your iron and press that into place. So what I'm going to be doing is just stitching here. Now, of course, this leads to all sorts of possibilities. You could sew a line of stitching here, or a double line of stitching here with your cover stitcher or your twin needle. It's really up to you. What I'm going to do is just simply one line of stitching through that overlocking line. When you come to the seam here, make sure that that seam is sitting on top of each other. Now go to your iron and give that a really good press, which will just help embed that stitching into the grain of the fabric. So when you're ready, put that hood away somewhere safe. I would like to say, if you get a teeny little bit of roping or tunnelling, which is, just trying to think if I've got any here. Oh, you can sort of see it here. It means this has been stretched out of place as it's been sewn. So if you get that, you'll need to unpick it and then press it and pin it in place before you sew it. So we don't want to end up with any tunnelling or roping. We just want it to sit nice and flat. So pop that hood piece away somewhere safe, and now we're going to work on the front. The pieces you're going to need for the front are the main upper front piece and then the front band. So let's start with the front band. Take your front band and fold it right sides together, and what we're going to do is overlock these short ends together. Turn that so it is wrong sides together. We want a nice sharp corner. Now if you wanted to add a contrast, you could of course sew this in a ribbing fabric. You might just need to reduce the length to suit. Okay, so here is our front band piece, the lower part of it. So pop that aside somewhere safe. Right, so take your front piece, and the first thing we want to do is to overlock the edges to secure it. So we want to overlock here from the lower part of the armhole, right side up, to the same place on the other side. Oh, sorry, I've said the whole thing. We don't need to overlock the bottom. We only need to overlock from the armhole to the bottom edge, and then the same on the other side. Sorry if I said that wrong. Okay, so take this piece right side up with the hem facing the top, and you'll see in the center a notch. Take the band that you created earlier, and in the center there is a notch as well. So just secure those in place together. Now as we come towards the side, you'll see a notch there as well. So the notch here, we want to sit on that edge here that we've just pushed out, and then we want to wrap this extension piece around it. So that is 2 centimeters, which is 3/4 of an inch in from the edge, and we want to overlock that together starting on the edge. So as we approach the other side, we're doing exactly the same thing in reverse. That needs to touch there. We're wrapping it like that over the top and overlock off. So now when we turn this through, I'll just trim that back to an inch, 2.5 or so centimeters. So there is our lower front in place. Okay, so you could give that a press now. We want to press it so that that seam faces up. And now we're going to start working on the back pieces. So here is one of my pair of 2 back pieces. There's different ways of sewing this garment, but because I want to do a lot of decorative top stitching, what I want to do is overlock all the way through the back of the garment, right the way around the outside until I get to this notch here. And I want to do that right side up for both of these pieces. So I'm going to start this one at the notch, or just before the notch actually, and go all the way around to the upper centre back. So now I'm going to repeat on the other piece. I'd also like to note, if you have a cover stitcher, of course I've overlocked through the area where the hem is, so you wouldn't need to do that. So here is my other piece again. So this is my centre back. I'm going to overlock all the way through to the notch here. Come back to your plain sewing machine and place your lower back pieces right sides together. So come to the centre back, and we know it's the centre back because we had that notch just in. Place those pieces together. And I'm going to sew just on the edge of my overlocking so I hide it. So I'm going to say it's a 6mm seam, which is 1/4 inch, but it probably is just a tiny bit over that. It won't actually affect the pattern too much. When we stitch, we just want to make sure that none of our overlocking will be visible from the right side of our garment. So right sides together, stitch that. Make sure you back tack and start stitching down that centre back. You'll know you're on the right seam when you come across the double notches. Now they need to match. So now we're coming to the extension or the split area, and you'll see a notch as it goes out. We need to guesstimate a line down here and stop directly opposite that notch. So the distance from here, the raw edge, to where you stop will be 2 centimeters. And if you need to, you can line up this edge with your 2 centimeter line, and that's also 3/4 inch. So all we're doing is this, continuing on in a straight line. When we come opposite that notch, we're going to stop and back tack and stitch through. So that's because we want to put some decorative stitching through our centre back, and we'll be pressing that open in just a moment. Okay, so now we need to sew the lower miters. So take one of these, fold them right sides together, and match that overlocking. When you've got everything lined up, we want to stitch this short edge 1 centimeter from the raw edge, and 1 centimeter is 3/8 of an inch, and remember to back tack. And then the other side, do exactly the same thing. So fold it, match our overlocking and our raw edges, and stitch 1 centimeter, which is 3/8 of an inch. So that's the centre back miter completed. If we come around to the other side, we'll see 2 more miters. So just take one layer, fold and repeat. And do the same with the other side. Now it's time to fold all these miters through and go to your iron and press them, and it's a good idea to press them so the seams are open. And what you'll find this has done has created our hem allowance like so. So go ahead to your iron and press all those miters that we've just sewn and anything else that looks like it needs pressing. So now we're going to sew the shoulders together. So take your back yoke piece, place it right side up. Then take your front piece and place it right side down and match the shoulder areas. And we're going to sew the shoulder seams. Now we're going to move on to sewing the sleeves in place. My sleeve pieces are identical, so there's no front or back, and that's because this is a drop shoulder. Because I'm not using a cover stitcher, what I'm going to do now is just secure the lower area of the sleeve, so the cuff area, the wrist area here. If you have a cover stitcher, you can skip this step. So take the front and the back that you overlocked together at the shoulder and come to one armhole edge. Place your garment right side up. Place your sleeve right side down, so we have right sides together. And in the center of the sleeve you'll have a notch. Match that to the shoulder seam like so. On the yoke side, the edge of the shoulder will match with the edge of the yoke. On the other side, the edge of the sleeve should finish at the top of your overlocking there. And so when you're ready, just overlock that sleeve together. And then just go ahead and repeat that on the other side. So now we're going to overlock the back yoke to the back. So take your garment, the area you've just sewn, and place it so right sides are up. And here's the double notch at the center of the yoke. Then take your lower back and find the center back seam, and that's the one with the notch on either side of it. And those double notches there will match the center back seam there. And then match that across like so. So you will have a notch here, which is where we started overlocking from. That notch there will match there. So there's our sleeve like that. And then on the other side we have a notch there, and that will match through to that seam there. So when you're ready, overlock from that notch there across the top of the yoke. When you get to the centre back area, make sure that that seam we pressed is pressed open. this is the stage we'll be at now. Whoops, we'll just get rid of that little bit of overlooking there. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is sew the sleeve or the underarm seam into place. So find the sleeve, fold it right sides together, and we're going to overlock up. Now this is the yoke where we just finished. Now when we get to this area here, we've already overlocked through it, but I'd like you to just overlock it down 2 inches 5 centimeters. So come down and you'll be re-overlocking over the top here. So that's just to secure this corner here. Now if you're not comfortable with doing that corner, just go over that again with your plain sewing machine just to reinforce that area there, and repeat that for the other side. So as I said earlier, if you're not comfortable about that corner, you're overlocking for some reason, all you need to do is just run a line of stitching with your plain sewer just in that corner like that, and that will just reinforce things. But while we're on the job, we need to finish this seam off. So this needs to be sewn with our plain sewing machine because this seam needs to be pressed open for our stitching. So we may as well kill 2 birds with 1 stone and reinforce that corner while we're on the job, and then come down this area here and match that split like so. So just like we did earlier, match those edges, and we want to sew just in from the edge of our overlooking. So I'm going to say it's a 6mm, but it's actually more like I said 1/4 of an inch, sorry, 6mm, so it's a little bit more than that, so just over it, 8mm or so. So follow that line down, and we want to go down just like we did before until we find this notch here, and we want to sew to directly opposite that notch, and the distance from here to where we stop is 2 centimeters, which is 3/4 of an inch. So you just want to carry that line down, making sure everything's nice and matched, and then stop when you get to that notch, maybe 1 more stitch, and then back tack to secure it. Okay, and then go ahead and press that seam open, and as you can see, we're creating the split in the bottom of our garment. So when you've done that side, do the other side, and then go and press those seams. So now's the time to do some top stitching. In a perfect world, this should have been, which is the centre back, top stitching should have been done before the yoke was attached, but you can play around with the construction sequence, but it actually would have jiggered up the side split, so this is the reason I'm doing it this way. What I'm going to do is starting, this is the yoke and this is the centre back. I'm running a line of stitching down either side of the centre back. We have 6mm, 1/4 of an inch allowed, so as long as you stitch within that, the distance is completely up to you. So I'm going to start at the edge of my yoke. I'm just going to use my presser foot as a guide. and I'm stitching down the centre back. So make sure when you stitch this that that seam is open, and you can do this from the back if you want, but I'm doing it from the front so I can see what I'm doing. So whatever distance you choose to top stitch is up to you, and you can top stitch from the other side, from the back if you prefer. The main thing is to make sure that everything's open when you do it. So there's 6mm allowed for here, so just make sure when you're stitching that you stitch within the 6mm, 1/4 of an inch allowance. So the design you use for the top stitching is up to you. What I'm going to do is just follow the line that I did for the facing. So basically here I'm going to do a little triangle. I can feel it. You could sketch this onto your garment if you prefer. I'm just going to stitch this out to the edge of my top stitching, rearrange my work, and continue down. Now of course if you have a cover seamer you can do this with your cover stitcher or a twin needle if you prefer. So this is the area where my mitre is at. I'm just going to up and pivot. Now the hem has a 2cm hem allowance, which is 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so I'm coming to the side split at the front area here. So underneath you'll have the mitre that you've pressed out. So when you get here, again you can decide if you want to do decorative stitching up here, or you could go across. I'm just going to do what I did on the other side and create a little triangle. So all I'm doing is stitching here, turn and pivot, and then I'm going to turn and pivot. Now at the front I press this up, so I'm actually going to sew a line of stitching on this side here. And of course once we've reached centre front here, everything you've just done on that side, just repeat as you go back to the centre back position. Okay, so go and give that a really good press and we'll continue. So what we're going to do is turn at the notch position there, and that's notched at 2 centimeters, which is 3/4 of an inch allowed for. So just turn that up. Now the fabric I'm sewing today is just a winter weight jersey. It has 50% stretch, but it really is reacting more like a 30% stretch, so I can stretch it a third of the way, but I can, if I really force it, stretch it out to 50%. So it's basically working like any standard sweatshirting fleece fabric would. It's got the same sort of properties. And so because I'm doing that top stitching detail, I'm now just going to run a second line of stitches exactly parallel to the first on the fold edge, so on the extra layer of fabric, and just at whatever width you prefer. I'm going to do mine, or I'm doing mine at foot width, which is just short of 1/4 of an inch. So it's around about 5 or 6 mils. So when you've done one sleeve, just go ahead and repeat that on the other sleeve, and of course if you've got a cover stitcher, just use your cover stitch machine to do that. So now we're working on the hood. You can tell the front of the garment, so here's our front is a single notch and the centre back has a double notch. And what we need to do, you'll find the easiest way is to turn your body of your garment so that it is wrong side out or right sides together. I always find it's easier to work like that. And place your garment so it's like this, so wrong sides out, back is at the back, the front is at the front. Now we need the hood piece that we created earlier. So I'm using my plain stitcher because I want to tack stitch this into place. So take your hood, and what we want to do is come to the lower edge of the front like this, and we want to place this hood so the right side, if it's facing up, is over the left side. And right on this line here you'll see a notch. We want the notch here to match up with that notch there. And just run a line of tacking stitches, making sure those edges are together, and make sure it's within the seam allowance, and the seam allowance is 6 mils, so we really just want to run a line of stitches just to hold that together, just shy of 1/4 of an inch. That way we don't have to take our tack stitches out later. So you can see how this is going to cross over when it's finished. Right. So now we want to place this inside our garment. So take your garment like that, and making sure our hood is right side out, which it should be because we haven't done anything to it. Place that inside the garment like that. And the area we just tack stitched, that notch there matches the notch at the front. And just hold that in place with a pin. If you follow that around, the back of the hood here matches the double notches there, so just put that seam directly in the centre of those double notches. And then there'll be a notch on the hood here which matches the shoulder. And one on the other side. And just double check when you're doing this that it is right sides together. Now if you're comfortable, you can now go to your overlocker and overlock that together. If not, just run a line of tacking stitches and then go to your overlocker. So with our overlocker, all that remains now is to overlock this hood into place. It's a good idea to not start at the centre back, but you can start at the centre back if you're putting something like a label in to hide it. Hide the stitching. So I'm going to start at a shoulder. just make sure all your raw edges are even. So there is our garment completed, and thanks for joining me with this sew along video. I hope you enjoy your garment, and remember to join up for my Facebook pattern discussion group and subscribe to my channel. Look forward to you joining me soon for my next sew along video.